Men of the 1st Marine Division could hardly recall a day more harrowing than January 31st, 1968. As the bullets were flying all over the place, they did their best to hold their heads as close to the ground as possible. The enemy barrage was so relentless that they couldn't move an inch forward, nor could they retreat. This was one of those situations one couldn't get out of. All of a sudden, over the deafening noise of machine guns and small arms, a voice pierced through. "Get up, Marines. Do you want to live forever?" There he was, Gunnery Sergeant John L. Canley, standing tall and defiant in the rain of bullets buzzing around him. In moments when Marines' lives were hanging by a thread, he was their guardian angel and a fierce leader, running from one Marine to another, bolstering their spirits and courage. For the next 7 days, Gunny Canley's unyielding spirit would not only inspire his men in a grueling battle against an overwhelming enemy, but also remind them of the heroic fabric Marines are made of. John Lee Canley epitomized what it means to be a Marine. Born on December 20th, 1937 in Caledonia, Arkansas, he exhibited resourcefulness and determination from a young age. At just 8 years old, he worked as a delivery boy for a local grocery store, helping to support his family. However, his fate stretched far beyond the borders of Arkansas. It was something he realized after he saw the movie The Sands of Iwo Jima, starring John Wayne as Marine Sergeant John Stryker. Before the film had even ended, he was resolved to become a Marine. The only obstacle was his age. At just 16, he was too young to enlist in the U.S. Marine Corps. But resourceful kid he was, Canley found a way to make his dreams come through. He used his brother's birth certificate, which conveniently bore the initials LJ, the inverse of his own JL, to deceive the recruiter and pass the enlistment test. The rest was history. After enlisting in the Marines in late 1953, John Canley was stationed in South Korea and Japan, where he exhibited exceptional devotion to his duties and rapidly ascended to the rank of gunnery sergeant. In 1967, he deployed to Vietnam with Company A 1st Battalion 1st Marines. By the year's end, Gunny Canley had already become a legend among his fellow Marines, showing extraordinary composure under fire during combat operations. During the Battle of Con Thien on December 15, 1967, a corpsman from his unit was wounded. Paying no attention to the firefight that raged around him, Canley slowly approached the corpsman and took him to safety. Canley lived for his Marines and honestly loved them with all his heart. He never yelled at them or exposed them to humiliation. If someone screwed up, he would approach the guy, pull him aside, and with a soft voice explain how things are done in the Marines. Nothing less of excellence was accepted. It was January 31st when an urgent call for aid was received at the Phu Bai Combat Base headquarters. By sheer coincidence, just a few hours earlier, Task Force X-Ray, which included the 1st and 5th Battalions of the 1st Marines, had completed its redeployments to this base south of Hue. The previous night, Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army forces had launched a massive countrywide attack as part of the notorious Tet Offensive, targeting several critical locations, including the imperial city of Hue. Hue was chosen for its immense symbolic significance and strategic value. The city housed a large citadel, built by the French in the 19th century, which featured the tallest flagpole in South Vietnam, a symbol of the struggle for independence. At the same time, the Perfume River, which flowed through the city and divided into the two parts, played a crucial role in transporting waterborne supplies from the port of Da Nang into the region. Additionally, a rail and highway bridge crossing the river served as the main supply routes for a large number of American and South Vietnamese troops stationed in the demilitarized zone. In the north part of the city was the headquarters of the Army of the Republic of Vietnam 1st Division, as well as the Tay Loc Airfield, home base for the elite South Vietnamese Black Panther Ranger Company. With almost all combat troops deployed to the northern part of the city, the residential area to the south of the Perfume River was practically undefended, making it an easy target for the enemy. This area included the compound of the American Military Assistance Command Vietnam, which had sent the distress call. The attackers were aware of the importance of Hue, and especially of troops deployed within the city. The offensive on the city was thoroughly prepared with Mac V compound being just one of 196 targets they pinpointed for the forthcoming attack. At 0233 on January 31st, 1968, a signal flare pierced the night sky, marking the start of the coordinated offensive of a division-sized joint force of havoc on the city. Troops within the city were caught by surprise by the attack that focused on the Citadel, the Imperial Palace, and the airfield. At the Mac V compound, personnel watched in bewilderment as a firefight erupted just a few hundred yards to the north. Their shock intensified when a barrage of 122mm rockets struck their premises, creating craters 8 feet wide. The 200 men inside barely recovered from the shock caused by the rocket strike, when soldiers of the 804th Battalion of the 4th Regiment of the North Vietnamese Army stormed the front gate of the compound. Inside the compound, everyone scrambled to grab weapons and defend their position from balconies and walls. It was with great effort that they fought off repeated attacks from enemy soldiers armed with AK-47s and satchel charges, eventually defending the compound from being overrun. The initial failure to capture the Mac V compound prompted the North Vietnamese to change their tactics. They barricaded themselves in the nearby houses, planning to overwhelm the compound with mortar and machine gun fire. It was a grave mistake that they made because it allowed the men within the Mac V post to organize the defense and wait for the reinforcements to arrive. At Phu Bai Combat Base, 9 miles south, Brigadier General Foster LaHue of Task Force X-Ray received orders to assist the besieged Mac V personnel in Hue. His immediate response was to deploy the half-strength Alpha Company of the 1st Battalion, commanded by Captain Gordon Batchelor. As the day progressed, he planned to throw more and more units into the fight. The men of Alpha Company, roused from sleep by the order, quickly armed themselves and boarded the truck convoy. They rolled out of the base at 0830. The convoy took a different route to the city of Hue via Highway 1, which turned out to be a good decision, as they literally bumped into a platoon of 4 M48 tanks of Alpha Company, 3rd Tank Battalion, 3rd Marine Division. The platoon, unaware of the ongoing conflict in Hue, was traveling to a Navy LCU ramp for transport to be redeployed to the demilitarized zone. After a brief update, the commander decided to join the convoy. As the column of tanks and trucks progressed along Highway 1, they passed through several enemy-held villages. In these villages, the convoy was met with sniper fire but restrained from fighting back. Upon reaching the city outskirts, the Marines transferred to the tanks, while 2 trucks, equipped with quad 50 caliber machine guns, provided covering fire. The plan was to break through the compound as quickly as possible. As tanks roared down the highway, 50 cals provided covering fire against the enemy entrenched in houses along the road. The Marines on the tank provided covering fire from their small arms. The convoy reached the safety of the roundabout with only a few wounded. However, it was from this point that they would enter the area swarming with the enemy. As the convoy entered a causeway running through rice paddies, they were met with fierce fire from houses on both sides of the road. North Vietnamese were throwing everything they had at the Marines, firing from AK-47s and 40mm rocket launchers. Facing such a devastating barrage, Marines jumped off the tanks and hit the dirt. As tanks slowly progressed down the causeway, some of them followed behind, while others moved through a muddy ditch alongside the road. For the Marines, this was a completely new experience compared to the jungle warfare they fought at that time. It was the first time they were engaged in urban combat. As the firefight raged, there was little they could do but observe as tanks swung their guns around, blasting one house after another. Although tanks eliminated the enemy threat from within the buildings, enemy machine gun nests were causing havoc among Marines. As the enemy machine gunner was spraying bullets on the column, one of them hit Captain Gordon Batchelor while he was trying to drag a wounded Marine. Critically wounded, Batchelor was evacuated to Phu Bai along with other severely injured Marines. In the midst of chaos, Gunny Canley took over command of the pinned-down company. Realizing they were acting like sitting ducks, Canley and Sergeant Alfredo Cantu Freddy Gonzalez decided to act. They established a base of fire and maneuvered with a platoon in a flanking tank that eliminated several enemy machine gun nests. All that time, Canley was running across the battlefield, encouraging his men to keep on fighting and carrying wounded Marines to safety. As he always did, Canley paid little attention to enemy fire. He ran upright from one position to another. With 6 feet 4 inches in height and 240 pounds of weight, he firmly believed crawling was of no use to him, as he would still pose a huge target for the enemy. This way, he could move faster. As many of the Marines from the Alpha Company later recalled, hardly any of them would have survived the breakthrough if it wasn't for Gunny Canley. In response to the situation, another unit was sent from the Fubai combat base to help Canley and his men. Just after noon, Golf Company from the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines arrived at the scene and engaged the enemy. With joint effort, two companies broke through enemy lines and reached the MACV compound to the immense joy of its personnel. Without delay, Canley and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Gravel of Golf Company quickly evaluated the strategic situation of the compound, preparing it to serve as a command center for further operations. The plan was not to evacuate the MACV personnel, but to sweep the area around it from the enemy presence. Canley continued to lead Alpha Company for 4 more days before Lieutenant Ray Smith took over command. However, this didn't mean his acts of bravery came to an end. On February 4th, Gunny Canley and Sergeant Gonzalez led the company to an assault on the Joan of Arc High School in the nearby church, where over 100 North Vietnamese soldiers had fortified themselves. Unfamiliar with urban combat, Canley's troops approached the task with caution. They assaulted the complex slowly and meticulously, clearing one room after another from enemy presence. Breach teams employed C4 explosives and M72 law rocket launchers to penetrate the walls, followed by assault teams who swept the interiors with small arms fire. In the face of fierce opposition from one of the rooms, Canley showed exceptional bravery by moving to the position above the entrenched enemy and dropping a satchel charge from above. In just one move, he knocked out an enemy strongpoint. Unfortunately, that day, during the assault on the church, Sergeant Gonzalez was killed in action by enemy rocket fire. Once again, Canley proved his worth on February 6 during the attack on a government building held by the North Vietnamese. On 2 occasions, he jumped over the wall, fully exposing himself to the enemy to rescue wounded Marines. The battle for Hue raged on for another month, during which American and South Vietnamese forces methodically eliminated enemy strongholds throughout the city. For his exemplary courage in combat, Gunnery Sergeant John Canley was awarded the Navy Cross in 1970. His fallen comrade, Sergeant Gonzalez, received the Medal of Honor posthumously. Despite the widespread belief that Canley also merited the highest military honor, he initially did not receive it due to the lack of accredited eyewitness testimony. Those who had seen his acts of bravery were either deceased or had not been interviewed. Above all, Canley himself never sought recognition for his actions and never spoke of them again. In 1981, he retired from service as Sergeant Major to lead a quiet, peaceful life. Then, many decades after the Vietnam War was over, Marines who served with Canley launched Operation Gunny, an organized campaign to acknowledge the heroism of their sergeant with an award he deserved. It was a long and difficult battle, but at the end, it resulted in victory. In 2018, John Canley was awarded the Medal of Honor by the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Even on such an occasion, Canley refused to put himself first. On receiving the award, he said, "It's more about them than me. This is about the young Marines that sacrificed so much. I just happen to be their leader." On May 11, 2022, at the age of 84, Canley passed away at his daughter's home in Bend, Oregon, surrounded by his family. He was buried with full military honors at the Arlington National Cemetery. Sergeant Major Troy Black of the Marine Corps summed up Canley best by, quote, "Sergeant Major Canley was a leader and a warfighter who undoubtedly contributed to the battles won in Vietnam. His priority was and has always been his Marines, a true exemplar of Semper Fi." Thank you for watching this episode. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified of our next jump into combat. Stay tuned.